Hello, humans. You join us for a little bonus in camera material today. We were recently invited by Ian Fales from beforesandafters.com to present a video and do a Q&A around virtual production, more specifically using miniatures with virtual production. So we posted that video not long ago, and we thought we'd post our online Q&A that we did with Ian. So yes, here it is. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Ian Fales. Of course, I'm from beforesandafters.com, a visual effects education website. And I am joined by some of the team from InCamera, Tommy and JP. Hey guys, how are you?
Hello. Very good, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you everyone for logging on to this Zoom Q&A. What you can do here is listen to us chatter on, but you can also send your questions via the Q&A and other chat functions here. I will be looking at those and passing those questions on to Tommy and JP. But first, guys, just thank you so much for making that presentation about miniatures and virtual production LED walls. I loved it. I need to tell you something right up front. The Air Force One Boeing shot is hilarious because this week my friend Hugo Guerra and I interviewed Volker Engel, who was the visual effects super for Independence Day, and I'm gonna send him like a snapshot of it later on, and I think he will be absolutely chuffed. But that was a really fun addition to your presentation.
Amazing. I love that. I feel bad because we actually the shot that we ended up really kind of showing was much more of a kind of daytime thing rather than the sunset thing, right? Mm-hmm. It was such a mad.
Yeah. It was inspired by that setup.
Yeah.
We did, as we'll probably go into. We went through as many setups very briefly as we could, and I mean, if we had more time with access to the LED volume, we would have gone and done a proper recreation.
Yeah, I mean, you brought the is it F18 or F15?
F18.
F18. What you'd done this beautiful weathering job on, and
didn't have time.
No, I had my little model swordfish that I wanted to get in there as well. There was so much we wanted to do, but it's like there's no time. Move on.
I think that's so cool. I wanted to ask you quickly first. I know you mentioned it in the video, but to quickly mention what InCamera is. I'm so glad you guys do this YouTube channel. It's so needed to preserve that world of in-camera and practical effects. And you also never have the this is better than CG and CG is better than this. But just for people who don't know, tell us a little bit about what the YouTube channel is.
You want to go? You should I'm the mouthy one. I mean, in a way, it ended up being a bit of a lockdown project, really. We had started shooting stuff for it. Obviously, I think JP and I have very similar sensibilities in terms of, loving in camera, practical, if you want to call it practical. Sometimes they're very impractical approaches to sort of special effects, and kind of feeling that. I guess really it was just we had this feeling of there's a lot of buzz and there's lots of content out there on the sort of the visual effects, the digital effects kind of side of things, and we just kind of felt like there just wasn't a lot of chat and there wasn't a lot of stuff online demonstrating just practical approaches to filmmaking. And actually, if you can't afford a CG artist or a really amazing compositor, what's another way I could achieve this effect or that effect in sort of just straight up kind of in camera methods, whether it's just smoke and mirrors or miniatures or pyro or whatever. And so we had started shooting some stuff, and then pandemic hit. But when you're working, you just don't, those passion projects just take forever, right? And so we were shooting stuff, but then there was never time to edit. And then, pandemic, global plague, lockdown hit. And we run a studio here. So we had to close our doors, obviously, couldn't let anyone in. And after probably a couple of weeks of heavy drinking, we got quite bored. And then it's like, well, let's just go back and just start playing, because what else are we going to do, right? We're people who just like to be making things.
I think in a very, and I think also in a very selfish way, we kind of wanted to start putting out material we would like to see, or we would like to have seen, you know, when we were younger or when we were perhaps less experienced. We'd like, you know, there's such an amazing wealth of information online now that used to just be something you would read in a magazine or a book, and it's so accessible now. And like Tommy was saying, you know, a lot of the current stuff is very steered towards, you know, visual effects and going to computer-based solutions for effects versus perhaps some of the older techniques. And I think we were quite wary or conscious about putting more options out there for, you know, newer filmmakers perhaps who were learning from tutorials in After Effects, for example, but then helping to try and bridge that gap of thinking, well, rather than get this stock element from this website or going to all this stock footage solutions, maybe I could shoot that myself, or maybe I could grab that element and play with it, you know, on a kind of very precise level, so you could actually shoot an element bespoke to your project rather than just defaulting to these pre-made elements. And don't get me wrong, the elements nowadays are amazing what you can get. But it was kind of more opening that door to, if anything, expand the possibilities that are available now for modern filmmakers, or even people just enthusiastic about effects, you know, just playing with what they can do in their house or garage or whatever.
And it's not to say, and it's certainly not to say that that's not being done in the industry. There's lots of amazing practical effects work going on all the time, and there always has been. I think it was just a case of like, but no one's showing that, or there's not a lot of that out there, and so that was our kind of reasoning, I suppose, and also just to play doing some of these effects that we don't necessarily get asked to do, and so it's like, well, we want to do it, so let's just do it for the sake of doing it.
I love it. Let's actually jump into a question that's already been asked here by Hugo Guerra, who happens to be a friend of mine.
Hugo, hi Hugo. We love you. Love you.
He's asking you about the macro probe lens that you use, that he happens to have as well. There it is.
There it is.
He's also asked, have you found any other lens that could work well for this? He's asking because it's a 24mm. What do you need if you have a 50 or 100mm lens?
Well, there's a couple of things, because Lauer, who make this one,
Venus Optics.
Venus, so that we keep hearing chat and seeing little things of them coming up with a periscope version, which could be really interesting in terms of mounting your camera and things like that. I don't know if we're even allowed to mention that. I don't even know how we know that. I don't know.
There's rumours.
Rumours. We'll just call them rumours. Maybe it doesn't exist. I don't know. But I think that's really interesting, and I think that might be a bit wider actually. But I think, and if it were, because we've been shooting some water tank stuff for a film, and it was like we were just trying to get hold of it because it's not available yet. It might be that they're still working on it. They've had some feedback from people that have tested it or whatever. But like, if you could get that waterproof, it just, you're not shooting through glass anymore. You're actually in the tank, and we kind of you did a little version for a tank shoot where you basically put
a dental mirror on the tip of the lens.
So literally get a sort of so that we could dunk it right in and then move it around inside the tank.
Yeah, I mean the lens in general. I think to answer Hugo's question is that, and he's got one, so he probably knows this, is it obviously needs a lot of light, a lot of exposure, because it's got, by physics, it requires a lot of light. We have used that for quite a few projects, and things that haven't been featured in episodes we've also used it for. There is rumour of this new iteration of it that will have a periscope attachment or fixed front. We don't know yet.
No.
That will open up some more options for miniature shooting and doing some more interesting and sometimes easier rigging of the camera and the lens. In terms of stuff that we shot where we haven't used that, we just primarily use relatively run-of-the-mill 11 to 16.
Yeah, your Tokina 11 to
14
16
mil.
is pretty good. But what's the I think, is it Laowa as well that are also the 12 mil?
0D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That looks really exciting.
We're very keen to test out.
If anyone's listening.
Very keen to test out some low distortion wide angle lenses if any are out there.
But I think they've got quite a little range of actually quite wide lenses.
Yeah.
As you say, with what looks like zero distortion.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the minimum focus distance is for those.
They're very good, yeah.
They look almost ideal for miniature stuff, so eager to get our hands on those.
With the exception of one shoot that we did for a horror feature film, which we're currently in post-production of, we've used basically off the shelf kind of wide angle primes. It was and something that we plan to do in further episodes is explain more the camera or cinematography side of shooting miniatures, because that's a craft in itself, and it's also something that is a bit daunting to approach just in one episode. It'll probably be a longer running thing.
Right.
And it also depends on what you're filming and what you're shooting. We're planning to do some tests in the near future where we will be visiting more the traditional side of shooting materials, miniatures, which will be lower frame rate, very stop motion approach, rather than what we have done so far, which is, if not real time, it's been high speed stuff. Yeah, but the lens in the background has been very handy for a lot of
and actually
shoots.
On that film we were shooting, where we were, I don't think we can really talk about it too much at the moment, but I can sort of talk in broad terms, which is, so we were shooting a human in a full body suit to look like something otherworldly in a miniaturized version of the set that we built full scale in the studio. So we basically shot live action in the full scale build, and then we created a miniature version in order to have this enormous creature person in the space. And actually we did a test with the probe, and then we did a test, because we weren't getting crazy close, we did a test with, because it was all shooting on Panavision lenses, wasn't it? And we actually ended up going with the sort of Panavision 14 mil, I think.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, you know, those lenses are pretty tidy, and it was just about quality of image, really. I think that was why we ended up going that way. But obviously the probes are great for getting crazy close up, and that really gives you the scale.
Yeah, I mean, even they obviously offer some quite extreme results if you want them to. But what we also found in a lot of the setups that we've shot, not necessarily that we've included in episodes, is that it allows you that physical distance sometimes to get in or around a miniature or whatever you're shooting, really. So not always just for the extreme, you know, going through a donut kind of shot. Or
but just getting close, like without the camera getting in the way. But that's why the periscope thing could be so cool, if it exists. We don't know.
Awesome. I wanted to also talk about your shoot and your experience doing this. And you know, you sort of mentioned that you only had 3 days access to the studio, and I guess all these things are about learning experiences.
Yeah.
So I was kind of wondering if you could talk about what worked well with shooting miniatures against LED screens, and what was harder, what was more challenging, you know, what could be fixed next time or changed to get a better result.
Well, I think generally we found out there's probably a good reason why people don't currently default to shooting miniatures on LED volumes. And we did go into the whole shoot with that kind of in our minds, that we were kind of half expecting a lot of things to actually work against us. So as you said, I think in the video, that normally when you shoot live action with a LED volume, the benefit of having such options for high light output is you can close down to a certain degree, but no, you've always got that exposure there to defocus your background, right? So you've got all that beautiful interactive background that you never really focus sharp on.
Yeah, you can't.
Because you can't.
At the moment,
moment.
That's what I've sort of alluded to, that, you know, obviously with Rob, because we've had a couple of shoots in the studio here where we've shot stuff sort of live action, And yeah, it's very much like don't focus anywhere near it, because you really start to get a sense of the wall, right? But also there's so much that you have to throw in the foreground to make it work. It's like this idea that it's replacing green screen. It's like, no, it's not. A, because it's so expensive. I mean, it'll get cheaper, right? But it's always going to be a lot of money. But also, yeah, there's just so much I think that you need to really build in front of it, and it's really there as a deep background. It's not just that's your background, like, because I think when you've just got a person and it's just what's behind them, I don't know, you've got to get your lighting so spot on for it to feel right without anything else kind of in the sort of middle distance and stuff like that. And that's definitely what we found, is if you literally just put a person there and the background is just like, it just doesn't, you need more.
I think primarily what we've primarily what we've found is that the nature of shooting miniatures, you obviously want to close your aperture down to get a deep depth of focus, and as predicted, that's when we started to see the artifacts of the rear screen, because that's obviously pulling our background into focus more fully. And we're starting to see, things like panel lines and joins and things like that.
Which I think becomes more apparent because obviously our studio is not an enormous kind of warehouse made to build an entire volume in. So it's not so big, that we can be miles away from it. It's a relatively small in terms of what we've seen from ILM and so on. We were kind of sort of to some degree fighting for space in order to be able to get enough kind of a bit of parallax so that we've got some room to pan and whatnot. Whereas in those bigger volumes, I guess that's sort of less of a problem, because you can really come much wider.
I mean, on the upside, on the positive side, what we were what the technology confirmed to us in a really good way is that the light output from these panels are incredible.
It's insane, yeah. I mean, because they're used for events and things like that as well, right? And so you want people to see what's going on, 100 or so meters back in the stadium or something. It's like these things kick out. I mean, I remember it was the same on the on one of the live action shoots that we did. I think we never went above 5%. In terms of what its luminance, which is crazy. It was just too much. It was almost fighting to get it dull enough.
Well, it was a battle,
because you're battling with your lamps.
Yeah, it was a battle. It was a very unique situation and really valuable, I think, for us in our test, is that it kind of confirmed with us that yes, this screen technology is amazing for a background for doing miniature or tabletop or slightly smaller scale subjects, if you like. But because you're having to compensate for that brightness in the background, lighting your foreground then becomes quite an issue, because to get to an equivalency to match that light, even if you use, like we did and see in that picture with the side screens that helped illuminate our foreground, it's still quite a battle to get up to the levels that you perhaps want to. So we came away from this whole process, and again, it's very much a work in progress of testing, is that we came away with a few ideas that we want to continue to test, which I think will take it better within the range of kind of what we're after in terms of what we'll actually use for a rear in-camera background. We're investigating at the moment some possibilities with projection, with rear projection, so we don't get any seams in our background, and it's a slightly more quote-unquote focusable range.
And slightly more organic, right? Because you're not kind of dealing with pixels, or they're not technically pixels, but the screens that are broken down into LEDs. And
then use the LED screens, the high output screens on the side to help us illuminate our foreground action. So it's very much a case of kind of a bit of a hybrid solution to what we tested with, and being able to almost shrink down the need of the size of the volume as well slightly.
But again, bringing back potentially some of old school kind of approaches because this is like a rear projection or a front projection kind of setup, right? It's essentially achieving the same result but with different technology. But actually, maybe using a 3D sort of engine to create kind of parallax and link with your camera and stuff could we not use that but with projection as opposed to LED walls? And so if, you know, we've literally just today received very kindly a roll of this incredible rear projection material that's like, it's sort of almost black.
Yeah.
And so although you will need a crazy punchy projector, what that gives you is an amazing amount of contrast in your background image, which is often a struggle with projection. But then also therefore your lamps that you're using in the foreground aren't going to affect it as much, because that's the other thing with LED walls, is that if you start firing lamps towards them, it just washes out the blacks in the image that's on the screen. And so actually there's potential for projection to maybe come back a little bit, but then you need crazy output, and maybe that is more suited to models where you can do long exposures and things like that. But I think that's a really interesting kind of place to start looking at in terms of budget options, right? Or lower budget options. Like if there's a way that you can start using projectors instead of, you know, racks and racks of these LED monitors, maybe could be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I've just been sharing, of course, some images from the shoot, and it's always fun to look back at those.
Yeah.
Also, Hugo just weighed in with another comment here about suggesting that some of the latest consumer 4K projectors with 400 nits might be enough for a miniature.
Yeah.
Although he thinks you might need 1,000 nits. Sorry.
Potentially. I mean, that's the thing. I think we're eager to sort of like try something at consumer grade, see what that can do, and then see just how far you'd want to go. Like if you could actually get a rear or maybe even front projection setup, where you could actually get that exposure right for live action would be really exciting.
Yeah, so where we are at the moment is we're very excited about this and trying to push things forward a bit. And through me talking to a specialist who is very knowledgeable of rear screen projection, who's been an incredible wealth of knowledge. It was interesting posing some questions to him, because he never before was put questions to him about going lower than regular frame rate. So normally he's quite rightly asked about what's the brightest projector, what's the best contrast, what's best resolution and everything. And he'd always come back with a different answer for different applications. And what was interesting in our test work is realizing, well, we're trying to do something quite abnormal here. We're talking about regular frame rates here, and normally miniatures were almost never shot that way. They're always undercranked or long exposure, so you could get the depth of focus, you could control your lighting a lot better, and camera moves, all the kind of stuff, all the advantages that has. And what we're very interested in experimenting now is that the thing we can afford the most is to have actually a lower power rear projection, because if we're shooting at lower frame rates, we can have longer exposures, we can still keep that contrast in the background and get an exposure from it, but drastically reduce down the need for the higher light output, if you like, that we were in our tests, because we're trying to battle that LED, the power of that InCamera LED screen. So there's like I said, there's a hybrid solution out there that we're quite close to kind of getting fairly close to experimenting with and exploring more, because there definitely is a solution out there. And Hugo's totally right. There's some amazing 4K laser projectors that have great contrast inbuilt, and short throw projectors, things like that. The material that we have literally got delivered today is going to be very interesting to experiment with, because it's apparently one of the best materials to use and eliminates any kind of hot spots from rear projection, and it really optimizes the contrast level that you can get.
It looks really fun. Looking forward to having a go on it.
Well, would you believe we're getting close to the end of this time?
Oh God!
I'm so sorry about that.
I haven't started yet. We're just getting warmed up in.
But of course, everyone can go back and check the video out if they didn't get a chance to watch the full thing. It'll be there for just a short while, and you'll probably be exploring it a bit further, as you say, in the future.
Oh, definitely. We'll be following it up with some more experiments, I think. Yeah.
What about the one thing I also loved in the video was a little bit about your actual miniatures construction.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I kind of thought what was nice about that was people might think, you know, you need to go out and spend 6 months on one of these things, but you can produce amazing results relatively quickly, right, Tommy? And
Yeah, I think so. A few kind of, didn't have a lot of sleep, but we did it as a sort of 3D printed thing. Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing kind of, what should we say, fabrication technology becoming available now at, again, a relatively consumer grade. I think if we had, and there's kind of all sorts of interesting sort of 3D printers coming out now using different methods that create essentially something that looks kind of like die-cast quality straight out the gate. Whereas, I think the one that we've got was actually lent to us by a makeup effects artist, friend of ours, who, he's starting to use it for creating fast molds and things like that. Like rather than, all this stuff is so amazing. You can literally, rather than get an actor and cover them in stuff and create, is like just send someone over with a 3D scanner, do that, and then he'll go and 3D print it, and then he can do casts off that. And I mean, it's like, this is amazing. But yeah, so we had a relatively kind of, it's a good consumer grade one, and it meant it needed a lot of work. The guys whose design it was, they originally did it in Blender, and then they converted it into sort of STL files, which are what you use to create 3D prints. And so
it was all done in a rush.
It was crazy. Like, oh, we should do this. Okay, let's do that. Oh God, there's not enough time. Which is often how these things go. That's fine. It makes it more exciting. But yeah, it came out a bit of a mess, and we'd have to reprint things because it would just go mad and start doing something for no particular reason, and then you do another print with the exact same file, and it would do it almost perfectly. I don't get it, but yeah, you can knock this stuff up pretty quick, and especially if you're shooting in a relatively low light environment.
Yeah,
you can get away with quite a lot.
I think in general for majority of the videos that we do, we try where we can to use what we have to hand, right? So that also extends to, we might want to do example shoot of a building. Okay, well, what is out there online that's a simple assembly model that could do what we want to do, which is what we did with the Psycho House, for example.
Because for YouTube, we're not working with budgets, right? No. It's not a job. And so
we'd like to.
We'd love to, sure. But it's more about, like, for the channel, it's just investigating and exploring and demonstrating the technique. Which is kind of, it sucks because you put a lot of work into it, but ultimately, usually the thing you're actually photographing is like, ideally it'd be 4 or 5 times the size, and we'd have, a month to, put all the detail and stuff in. So that's always a bit like, if only it was. But it's fun. Like I think putting the seeds of these kind of techniques out there is good, because we're getting asked to do more and more of it now, which is really lovely. I think you kind of demonstrate these things, and people in this generation it kind of don't even necessarily realize that that's a thing. That's an option, right?
I think it's just doing exactly that. It's just saying, this is great what's out there. There's an amazing wealth of knowledge and information. But there's other options, and some people, it's still surprising to us how many people perhaps come to us or comment on our videos, really nice comments as well, where some people are kind of unaware of things having, how things were done in pre-digital days.
Or they see it and think, I did not expect that to look that good, which is lovely to hear. And also it's really nice getting comments from VFX artists who will see something that we do practically and go, this is so cool, because either as a reference thing, it can be really great for VFX. Like, models are amazing for reference.
Yeah.
Like for light play and stuff like that. I know, still on the movies and things like that, even though they know it's all going to be CG, digitally created, they will still make sort of rapid prototype models and stuff like that, just to see how light works and plays with it and things like that.
Well, a really good example was when we did our Dry for Wet Underwater series, which you, Ian, thankfully, thank you so much, featured in your amazing publication.
Love it.
But what was really interesting about that is it was so quick to set up rudimentary shots or camera angles and versions. I think I forgot to mention it in the episode itself, but I wanted to patent the term paper viz, because I made those all out of paper, and you could offer up a camera and do, get some fairly successful shots in terms of, okay, I might want to go for this kind of look or approximate a storyboard angle this way, being able to make something out of paper that you don't have to overly use your imagination that much to see what the final might look like or could look like. And I think that's another interesting thing is that, yes, previs is amazing these days, and a lot of movies are obviously based upon previs that's been done way in advance. But even just for that, just the idea of let's go out in the car park and shoot this and see if this works for an idea for a shot, and getting them open up the possibilities then for the kind of serendipity nature of real based physics and things like that again can be amazing resource for VFX artists, and we're all for that because we love VFX and we love digital. We have no side of the fence at all that we are too firm on.
I think they're two sides of the same coin ultimately, right? It's all make believe, none of it's real. You could call a practical effect real, but obviously it's not.
Well, we'll need to wrap it up there, but thank you, JP and Tommy. Really been fun chatting and obviously watching that video earlier. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. Make sure you go to YouTube and search for InCamera TV for the InCamera channel. It's fantastic. And I can't wait to see what you guys do in the near future.
Thank you,
Ian.
you
so much again.
Total pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
So there it was. That was our chat with Ian. Huge thanks to Ian for inviting us to FMX. He's just a total dude.
Legend.
And he's been a great supporter of ours. He's put us in print and everything. So if you're into VFX, you really absolutely need to be following him. So his website is Befores and Afters, which he runs with some people, but he also does really interesting blog posts and podcasts. I think it's VFX Artifacts. What else?
His Twitter feed is worth following just in itself.
Yeah.
Always linking to good articles.
He's just all over everything going on in the VFX world. So if you're into it, go and follow him on all the channels. It was just obviously the experience of shooting the virtual on the VP screen in a slightly unusual context, that is to say shooting miniatures, was really fun. And I think as much as anything, obviously it was just a really experimental kind of few days, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think what came out of it for us, one of the really exciting things that came out of it for us is actually how we could potentially use Unreal but not using LED screens, and actually to there's the kind of the TV screens in the building thing, which is really fun, and using it actually inside miniatures, but also the projection possibilities.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of scope to be explored in terms of where we are very interested in taking it forward. So things like projection for the in-camera background to certain shots, and using the LED screens as we did, a really good interactive form of light for our foreground. And I think just generally tailoring it a bit more towards the smaller scale or the more miniature scale, and also optimizing our method of screen projection for lower frame rates and more exposures and more options that can give with motion control and multiple passes, repeatable passes, things that normally fall outside of the live action use of a LED volume, but things that we can really capitalize on by using something like a projection method for the rear screen.
And just that at least in that context, it kind of makes the technology quite a lot more accessible to more people, not just folks involved in enormous productions that can afford huge LED volumes. So I think that's just, we're just really excited to start playing with that technology in a different way, and presenting you with our findings. So yes, hope you enjoyed that little chat with Ian. I think it's time to say goodbye. Thanks so much for watching, and you know the rest. Follow us on the stuff and all of that business. All right, see you soon.